Hi, Internet. It's Emily S.W.
Sam.
And we're coming at you with something a little different format. We're podcasting.
That's right.
Don't worry, we are not white male dude bros. We're not pulling an alpha male podcaster on you, but...
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah, quite the opposite.
The idea for this came from our Gothic writing chit-chats.
Yes.
We basically had a podcast already on YouTube.
Yes.
There was no visual component. It was just us talking.
Yes.
So we just thought, why not just make a podcast then? We were already doing it.
This will be similar to our Gothic chit-chats, except we're going to be able to go a little more in-depth about things. In-depth story dives, stuff that kind of falls outside of our monster trope, our monster themes.
The chit-chats on YouTube were mainly focused on how to write, how to create those kinds of characters, what kinds of elements these stories have, these characters have, how they have changed through time, and how it applies to modern writing.
Yes.
This is going to be more diving into the stories and picking apart the books themselves.
Yes.
We, very surface level, I think, when we talked about the tropes, we talked about a lot about how they evolve.
Yes.
But we didn't talk as much about what each of those character types meant within the story.
No, we were more just, like, looking at a wide range of things and, like, okay, what are the common elements to pick them out? This, we can be more focused and really examine individual things. Which, obviously, we might delve into not just novels. Short stories, poetry. I don't know if you know this, Internet, but I love poetry. So I've been working on researching some Gothic poetry that we can talk about. Literary theory, literary philosophy, rhetorical, like criticism, like all sorts of stuff.
You have the English degree.
I do. I have an English degree.
I just have read books. So between the two of us...
Yeah, we're like two different kinds of expert. I say expert loosely. It's just a bachelor's degree.
Just a bachelor's
degree.
Yeah.
It's not like
Not a PhD in literature?
No. Listen, if you're doing that, more power to you. I will just read books for free.
Yeah, my cousin's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Good luck to her, but I would rather just have my bachelor's degree and sit and make a podcast with my friend.
It's a lot cheaper.
It is. It is. You already have the nice microphone.
I do. I bought the microphone for recording instruments. I think this is actually what it's for.
Podcasting?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what this podcast is going to be. Stay tuned for more. And obviously, as we go, we might tweak things, add things in, whatever. If there's ever anything that you want to add, leave a comment. People leave comments on podcasts, right?
You can't leave comments on Spotify.
No, okay. Well, follow us on Instagram and leave us a comment there if there's anything you want to see. So we're drinking Italian wine today because we are talking about a story set in Italy.
Not the Czech Republic?
Not the Czech Republic. Supposedly.
I realized we had said when we watched the film version, we said, stay tuned. But we have no idea which order these things will actually be released in.
It's true. If this comes out first, we can just put a link to it in the description.
That's true. Anyway, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the Castle of Otranto. Woo, fanfare!
Insert some music or something here.
By, was it Horace
Walpole.
I knew it started with an H. Horace Walpole. In my defense, I listened to it. I wasn't reading it physically.
I read it, and then I also listened to it because I read it like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, if you want to listen to this story yourself, you can go on YouTube, you can go on Spotify or wherever.
There's a lot of audiobook versions because it is well over 200 years old.
Yes.
It is very public domain.
Yeah, I really like the one I listened to on YouTube. The narrator was good.
I listened to one on Spotify, and it was okay until I got to the end, and it just cut off the last 3 pages.
Boo. And I highly recommend, like, it's only, if you're listening to it, the video length is 4 hours, which obviously, if you speed it up like I do, it takes a little less time.
It's a fairly short novel.
Yeah, it's like a novella.
It was published in 1764.
So older than this country. But yeah, Horace Walpole was a character himself. I feel like he was the perfect man to write the first Gothic novel.
That's why this story is notable, and that's why we're starting with it, because this is the first story, the first published work to not only set the mood for the genre, but to call itself a Gothic novel.
Yes, Horace was a Gothic fanboy.
He was.
He loved Gothic.
His manor, which was called
Strawberry Hill. Such a good name. Such a good name.
Was complete, like, Gothic revival style before the Gothic revival was actually a thing.
Yeah, this guy he just had a lot of time and a lot of money, and nothing else.
But to start entire movements.
Literally, he started a movement.
He was the moment.
He was the moment. I was gonna say something else, and it's whatever if I think of it. Oh, I remember what I was gonna say. We are starting with the first Gothic novel for our podcast. We are not necessarily going in chronological order for the rest of the podcast.
No.
We will be covering various authors, various time periods, but we're starting with the beginning.
Right. We might delve a little bit outside of Gothic to horror, sci-fi, just any kind of dark genre fiction.
Basically, it's our podcast. We're going to talk about what we want to talk about.
You know, I was thinking, because I had mentioned before that since we're not celebrity personalities or online personalities, we have to have a topic that's pretty niche, that gives people something to listen to. I think this is about as niche as it gets.
Yeah, we're the niche.
It's so niche, I don't even know, like... Because there are other, like, literature podcasts that used to see, like, an episode or two.
Yeah. Thanks, Pinot Grigio.
No, that's just how my brain is.
No, that's fair.
Colleen makes fun of me all the time because I say sentences out of order. I mix up words.
Yeah. It happens.
An episode or two about Gothic fiction. But to have an entire series dedicated to it?
Yeah. Well, I also feel like because I work in a library, public library, so many books that I see, especially like new books or whatever, they'll have in the blurb, you know, like a new Gothic, or, you know, in the Gothic style, or Gothic elements, or like Gothic is such a popular, like, buzzword in newly published fiction, but not a lot of people talk about it, especially not the original Gothic, which is what this all stems from.
This is also a good place to start because Castle of Otranto also basically checks every box.
Yes, it made all the boxes for everyone else to check. It made the boxes,
yes. Yeah. Every single, like, Gothic trope stereotype, at least in what I've been referring to as, like, classic Gothic. So not, like, monster horror. Like, it's not a vampire story. Yeah. It's not a sci-fi crossover.
Well, yeah, right? Once you start adding, like, monsters and stuff, then it becomes a little different.
This is a Gothic romance. It's a little light on the romance.
Yes, we've got all the hits. We've got the big spooky castle.
That is the number one thing you need. It's in the title.
It is. It's like the main character.
The amount of stories that take place revolve around or involve a castle,
a manor. Yep.
Some sort of very large, very old, opulent, grandiose place.
Extra points if it was once opulent and grandiose, but has now fallen into disrepair.
Correct. This castle is obviously a symbol of power. If it's a crumbling castle, you could say it's power waning.
Power is a big thing in the Castle of Otranto. That's like the whole driving force behind the main villain, is greed, lust for power.
Should we talk about this story then?
Yes, let's not talk about things out of order because things might get confusing for our dear audience.
Alright, Horace Walpole.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about what you learned about him?
What I learned about Horace Walpole was that he... My brain just froze for a second there. What I learned about Horace Walpole... The audiobook version of The Castle of Otranto that I listened to had a brief little, like, biography of Horace. Dear old Horace at the beginning. And I listened to it, and I sent Sam a message, and I was like, this man was the perfect man to write the original Gothic novel. Because he was... In the audiobook I listened to, they quoted one of his letters to a friend, I think, and he was like, he literally, Horace was like, I don't really do much of anything. I'm here, whatever, like, because, like, at first, he had nothing, like, he was not a lord at first, and then, like, his father died, and then his brother died, and then his other brother died, and then his nephew died, and then eventually, after this whole long life that he lived, doing not much of anything, he became a lord.
Because there was no one else left.
There was no one else left.
To take the title.
Like, he didn't have any, like, he didn't go to war, he didn't do any, like, great deeds or anything like that. He was just kind of existing, which I respect. Well, yeah, and I was also, I don't remember if this was in the audiobook or if I came across in my research of Horace later. But I guess when he originally published this book, he didn't, like, because the book is framed like, oh, this was discovered a manuscript in this place, whatever.
Yes.
And in the original copy, he didn't, like, he had a character saying all that. And then later he admitted, oh, I made all this up, because I think there was some confusion and some people were like, oh my god, is this true? Was there actually a giant helmet?
Yes, the audiobook I listened to had the first edition preface on it, so it was reading as if I think it was supposed to be like a monk who had translated
he like translated it.
I thought, wow, he's framing this like found footage.
He really is. He really did. I was thinking about that too, actually. It really is like a found footage
manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, and then after he admitted that it was like when people found out that the Blair Witch Project was fictional, and then they got angry about it.
Yeah. And they were like, oh my god. But yeah, and I read it caused quite the stir, and it was quite horrific. Of course, to a modern audience reading this in retrospect, it doesn't seem quite so horrific, but that's because we've been inundated and...
Right, but at the time, this would have really blurred the line between reality and fantasy. Which makes sense because it's also based on a dream that he had.
Yeah, it was based on a dream that he had with the giant, basically.
Yes.
And he was also a huge medieval history nerd, which is relatable. There's also some... We'll get into this a little later, but I feel like there's quite a few, like, very Shakespearean in this story.
I was reading that there was a lot of references to Hamlet.
Yeah,
I can attest to this because I've never actually read Hamlet.
It's got a Hamlet vibe. I'm not a Hamlet expert, but I have read it. I've seen a fair few adaptations. The one with Kenneth Branagh, classic. David Tennant, amazing. The Lion King.
I was gonna say, does that count?
It isn't technically an interpretation of Hamlet, but it's got a Hamlet vibe. It's definitely got especially with the talk of the ghosts and the family kind of haunting, and there's like a prophecy and all this wild stuff. Pure maidens.
Okay, I can see it.
Yeah, like there's more comedic elements in this than I think there are in Hamlet, but...
Another thing I wrote down that was discussed in the preface, because it was this monk saying that he was translating this text from Italian.
Yes.
He, as the character, talked a lot about how superstitious and kind of silly people in the Middle Ages were. When I was compiling a list of Gothic fiction that we could potentially look at to talk about, so much of it was set in the Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. And I think that does make sense because when you think about it, all of like our fairy tales, our folklore, everything supernatural in our Anglo-based culture comes from the Middle Ages. And people were superstitious. We've talked about it with our witch chit-chat, where people saw the devil and everything. So to when you set something like this in the so-called Dark Ages, then you can your characters, I think, you can write them to be more receptive to these supernatural elements. not like a post-Enlightenment audience or a modern audience.
Yeah.
Who aren't going to accept these strange supernatural occurrences as readily.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, especially literally the opening of this book is a giant helmet crushing a prince. That's not a spoiler, it's like the first thing that happens.
Mm-hmm. It's just a time where anything was possible.
And people just, like, there's a little bit of, nah, you didn't see that. And then everyone's like, no, yeah, that's a helmet. Okay, there's a giant. Yeah, so that's a good point. Setting it in the medieval times also, like, you get that kind of not gullible's not the right word, but like you don't have to deal with your character's skepticism.
Right. If you're going to write a modern story to make your modern characters believable, you have to first surmount their disbelief.
Yeah.
when it comes to these things happening.
Yeah. So you can kind of circumvent that with medieval characters. And I also think, and I think Horace can attest to this as well, there's something very romantic about the medieval time period, even to us now.
Because again, anything was possible.
Anything was possible, and obviously there was a lot that wasn't romantic about it, but I think it's easy to romanticize because you have knights. That's when the cathedrals were built. Like, knights were running around saving people, doing good deeds. Supposedly.
Not so good deeds.
Yeah. Castles were being built. Cathedrals. All this stuff.
It's like the era of kings.
Yeah, exactly. Before the middle class.
Yes. We definitely tend to look at it from the point of view of seeing these stories through the lens of the upper class. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, it focuses on the kings, the queens, the princesses, the knights. You don't get very many stories about your common farmer peasant.
No, because most of your medieval farmer peasants were just concerned with staying alive, which isn't a very romantic story. That's what stories are written about to escape from, essentially.
Did you also... Did you listen to the preface with the monk character translating the manuscript?
I believe I did.
Because there was also a bit of a self-roast in there, too. Which I appreciate.
I don't remember that.
He said something along the lines of, clearly this author was talented, but his talents would have been better suited at writing anything else.
Oh, no, I don't think mine had that. Or if it did, I must have zoned out. Because I don't remember.
Basically calling this kind of fantastic story a bit silly and a waste of time.
That's funny. Yeah, I feel like I would remember that if I listened to the... Because the one that I listened to definitely had, like, a preface from Horace himself talking about,
So you must have had a
I think it was it must have been a later edition, yeah.
I appreciated that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Alright, so that's introductory stuff.
Yes.
We've got the setting. We've got the author.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the plot.
The meat and potatoes.
Yeah, so for right off the bat, most stories, especially from this time period, the end goal of the story is marriage.
Yes.
This one starts off with a marriage.
Wow.
A marriage that
almost marriage.
An almost marriage. Yeah, they're getting ready for a marriage.
There is a wedding.
It's about to happen.
And then, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, splat! The prince is dead.
Yeah, Prince Conrad
is squashed by a giant helmet sent from the heavens. Very unpleasant way to go. Well, when you think about it, too, just being squashed is not a normal human death. No. That's something you do to, like, a bug. So, that definitely makes you think about your humanity a little bit. Of, what if there was a giant who could squash me like a bug? And Conrad got squashed.
Conrad, he spent a lot of time describing him as kind of sickly.
It did. It really did not paint him in a good light.
He's also only 15 years old.
Yes. I actually missed that my first time around, and I was reading about it later, and I went, oh, shit.
I made a note of this, because the way it introduces the characters is it introduced Manfred, the father,
our villain,
the prince of Otranto in the story, who's the father of Conrad and Matilda. It introduced, I think, Matilda first, said she was 18, and then Conrad, her brother, who was 3 years younger. Conrad is the one getting married. At 15 years old.
Yes. Well, yes, because Manfred Very Italian name. Obsessed with lineage and legacy and stuff. So obviously the male heir.
Can we sidetrack?
Yeah.
A hot minute, because a very Italian name. I noticed there's no one in this except for, like, Isabella.
No.
Has an Italian name.
No. The names are, Hippolyta is the wife.
Hippolyta, Matilda, Manfred, Conrad, those are all very German.
Yeah. Which is funny because Horace is not German either.
And then there was a Juan and Diego.
Yes!
Which just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, the Diego. I was like, Diego?
Well, they're very Spanish.
Yeah.
There's Friar Jerome.
Oh, Bianca. Bianca's Italian, isn't it?
Italian.
Yeah. She's like the comedic relief.
Yeah, and then there's also Theodore, which is not Italian either.
Mm-mm.
So...
Or Czech.
No. This could have been set anywhere in Europe. Like, the fact it's in Italy, almost is irrelevant because the characters are not Italian.
No, I feel like he just said it in Italy so he can make the preface, like, oh, it's like found footage, like, I'm inventing a genre.
Yeah, unless, like,
you can't see me, audience, but I'm using my thumbs like I'm texting on a phone to illustrate this point, which is definitely not what Horace was doing.
Ippolita, I think, is Greek.
I think so. Is it?
Ippolita,
it does sound Greek.
It feels Greek.
Let's Google that real quick. I also feel like it might be a biblical name. I don't know, it could be. I don't know anything about the Bible. In Greek mythology, Hippolyta is the daughter of Ares and Atreia, queen of the Amazons, and a sister of Antiope and Melanippe.
Where did Horace get these names from? There's also a Frederick, which is also a German name.
Yes, very German name. The name Hippolyta translates as she who unleashes the horses.
Well, there wasn't any of that going on in the story.
Oh, there is a Shakespeare character.
That's probably why he chose it.
From A Midsummer Night's Dream. He is engaged to Theseus, the Duke of Athens. Yes, that's probably where he got the name from.
He's not really selling the setting with the characters.
No, he's really not.
Conrad was squashed to death by a giant helmet falling from the sky.
In the castle. Or, like, it
was in the courtyard.
It was in the courtyard, yeah.
And Manfred runs out. Manfred, being his father, runs out.
Yeah, well, no, first the servants are like, oh my god, and he's like, I don't believe you.
The servants saw it.
Yeah.
He didn't believe them, but then he went out and saw it.
Yeah, and he's like, oh damn, you're right. My son did get squished.
Right before his wedding.
Yeah, so then, of course, the women are all distressed. Hippolyta, who is the very virtuous, godly, meek, sort of the mother of Conrad, the wife of Manfred, lady of the manor, princess, I believe, is what she's described.
Yeah, they were prince and princess.
So she's obviously distraught. And then Matilda, the daughter, and Isabella is who
was Conrad's fiancée. Yeah. And this was an arranged marriage.
It was an arranged marriage. And now Isabella's father is, like, off somewhere.
He's off crusading, I believe.
Yeah, missing. He's not directly in the picture. But anyways, so this was an arranged marriage. So Isabella and Matilda are comforting Hippolyta, and they end up going, like, up to their rooms, or whatever.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of,
just people going to their room.
Manfred is like, hey, my son's dead, so I guess someone's gotta marry Isabella.
The reason why Manfred is so obsessed with preserving his lineage has to do with an ancient prophecy. Prophecy was that the rightful owner of the castle would return. Mm-hmm. When the original owner grew too big to fit inside of it. Obviously, this doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
The original owner of the castle was someone called Alfonso the Good, and he's very deceased. He is mostly known for having a very large statue by the monastery, which the peasant boy Theodore points out. The helmet that has squashed Conrad looks identical to the helmet that normally sits on top of the statue of Alfonso.
Yeah, and no good deed goes unpunished.
Of course not, because Manfred accuses him of sorcery.
Yeah, Manfred's like, oh, you have 2 brain cells to rub together? You must have done this. Peasant!
Witchcraft!
Necromancer!
Yeah, that was a good one.
So, of course, this poor boy who was just trying to help gets accused and detained. And they decide, like, you know what, we're gonna imprison him in the helmet.
Yes, which
is somewhat comical.
First of all, how did they get him in it and not expect him to also be able to get back out?
It's like, if he's a sorcerer... Well, there's this whole thing, like, this whole big thing about him with, like, food. Like, I swear this exchange took place over a couple of minutes where they're talking about, it's like, well, he'll sustain himself, he's a sorcerer, he can summon his own food,
they thought
blah,
he'd
blah,
be
blah.
able to feed himself even if he was trapped underneath this helmet.
So I guess they, like, boosted him up and shoved him in through, like, the eye slits or something. And then, like, I don't know.
Spoiler alert, he escaped.
He did. Not through the eye holes, though. He escaped because the weight of the helmet, I guess, crushed the floor. So then he was able to get down underneath into these secret tunnels beneath the courtyard.
And he runs into somebody in the tunnels. But the reason that the person is in the tunnels, as you were saying before, Manfred had an idea.
He did, a very bad idea.
If Conrad can't marry Isabella...
I guess Manfred will.
Problem is, Manfred's already married.
To the virtuous Hippolyta. Just like Henry VIII, Manfred was like, you didn't give me enough sons. The son you gave me sucked. And now he's dead. I gotta make some more with somebody else. Very Henry VIII logic. He didn't try to kill Hippolyta.
No, he was just gonna divorce her. But I think we can probably assume that Isabella is a similar age to Conrad.
Yeah.
Right? Manfred has got 2 teenage children.
Yeah.
So he's an age.
Yeah. And like, this girl is practically, like, they call it incestuous in the book. Like, this girl is practically his daughter. Like, she's in his care, she was gonna marry his son, like... They did use the word incestuous. Like, this is disgusting. This is gross, yes. Bro.
Wasn't necessarily about the age gap, but about the relationship.
The relationship, yeah.
Nowadays, we look at that age gap and go, ooh.
Yeah.
So he breaks this news to Isabella that he's gonna marry her instead, since Conrad now can't.
And she tries to be like, whoa, let's think about this a little bit. Well, maybe let's not. Like, she tries to talk her way out of it. That doesn't work, because he's a man... he is a prince, and he's got this inflated ego, and he's like, you know what? I have to do this. This is my power. This is within my power. This is my right, whatever. But Isabella is saved. Isabella goes to run away, but then they're in, like, the Great Hall or whatever. They're in some hall, and there's portraits of the past rulers of the castle. And they begin to move. And very spooky. A sigh. I believe the sigh is what it starts off with. And Manfred's like, what was that? There's nobody there. But then, when Isabella runs away, then the ghost, the guy in the portrait comes out of the portrait.
He does.
It is a specter, which obviously freaks Manfred out. Which is why he isn't able to give chase to Isabella right away. So she gets a head start.
No, but meanwhile, back to Theodore.
Our peasant boy.
Runs into Isabella. In the tunnels.
Yes, the secret tunnels.
And he helps her escape.
Yes.
And she's going to go to this monastery and seek refuge with the monks.
Pretty good plan.
Until one of those monks decides to go to the castle. And first Manfred proposes to him his whole plan. And now he needs the church to grant him a divorce.
Yeah, the Jerome, the monk, is like, whoa. What? Like, Jerome is trying to talk his way out of it now. So first we had Isabella trying to talk her way out of it. That didn't work. And then Manfred and Jerome get together. Now Jerome is trying to talk Manfred out of it.
And at the same time, it's realized that Theodore has also escaped.
And Jerome here makes a bit of a mistake.
He makes a big mistake.
Big mistake.
He thinks that he can,
He thinks that telling Manfred that Isabella is at the monastery will somehow fix the situation, or, like, that Theodore is her lover, or whatever. He's like, I know, Manfred will be so jealous, and because he thinks Isabella is this virtuous person, so if she has a lover, he won't want her anymore, or something like that.
He tries to rile him up.
Yeah, because he's like, this'll work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Surprise.
It backfires in a spectacular way, because Manfred decides instead to execute Theodore.
This poor, innocent peasant boy, his only crime so far was being smarter than everyone else in the room.
He's not even from here.
No, he's not. He's from a different village. That's right. I'm not even from here. Do you have jurisdiction over me?
But then we make a shocking discovery. We find out that Theodore is actually Jerome's son.
Plot twist!
And not only that, but Jerome is a count.
Yes, so Jerome ran off from counthood to become a monk, had an illegitimate son, and now they've reunited at the worst possible moment.
That's right, now he's got to backpedal in the most desperate way possible.
And now he's realizing, oh, this is my son, and I accidentally signed his death warrant.
Whoops.
Awkward. This is, again, what makes this such a great Gothic, like the first Gothic novel, is just, it's so dramatic. Every possible turn is just drama after drama. We've got illegitimate sons. We've got hidden royalty.
Like, secret tunnels.
Secret tunnels. Secret tunnel. I'm not gonna sing the song. I was just watching Avatar, so it's fresh in my mind. Ghosts. Giant helmets.
We've already had
prophecies.
One ghost. We've had a ghost. We've had inexplicable events and a prophecy.
This honestly, this story has everything. Manfred, as the villain, is, like, he is the epitome of kind of greed, lust, both for, power, but also, obviously, for this young, fertile woman, in a very carnal sense. Like, he's like, I'm the guy in charge. I'm the prince. My will is the only thing that matters. And he's justifying it all to himself with this kind of reasoning. So there was no way that Jerome was going to come in and be like, oh, well, God said. Because in Manfred is just too...
He didn't even try that, did he?
That's true, he didn't. He did try to manipulate Manfred, and that really didn't work. Theodore
doesn't get executed.
No, he doesn't.
But he does end up back in the dungeon or whatever. They don't try to put him back in the helmet.
No, they were like, oh, well, I guess...
That didn't work.
There was a flaw in this plan.
The first time.
Nobody checked to make sure the floor was intact.
And then that's when Matilda really comes into the picture. Because she helps him escape the second time.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they had this conversation when he was imprisoned the first time. And she's like, oh, this good, virtuous person, or whatever. So she's decided that he's a good guy, and he deserves...
See, not only that, but we have probably the funniest part of the story, which is a love triangle.
Oh my god, yeah. It's so ridiculous. It's...
Because both Isabella and Matilda are in love with Theodore.
Yes.
And they, have the most polite fight over him you could possibly have.
Do. And I feel like Theodore is supposed to be in love with Matilda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all just met.
Yeah, literally. Theodore is in love with Matilda because they had that conversation outside her window, I guess. And that's also why Matilda's in love with him. And Isabella, I guess, he saved her. So she's like, oh, I'm in love with you. That's a very teenager reaction.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Isabella finds out about this, and she says to Matilda, well, I thought you wanted to be a nun.
Oh, that's right. There are several different interpretations. I thought you wanted to be a nun. It's so funny. Well, yeah, because, there's this whole thing like, earlier in the story, Matilda is like, well, I would rather, go be a nun than be married, whatever, because, like, her servant Bianca is like, well, being married to a man, any man, is better than not being married at all, and I'm just like, ooh.
Theodore and Isabella have another key moment, though, before our next big plot event, which would be Isabella's hiding in a cave. Theodore goes to find her.
Yes.
After Matilda's let him out of his new imprisonment.
Yes.
And that's when, also, a messenger shows up at Otranto.
Yes.
And tells Manfred.
About Isabella's father, right?
He's coming back.
He's coming back.
He's coming back for his daughter, so, we find out that Isabella had not... The marriage was not arranged by her actual parents.
No.
But by substitute guardians, because it was believed that her father had been killed while on crusade. He hasn't been. And he's coming back. So Manfred now is a little nervous. Because this whole thing is just unraveling.
Yeah, things really aren't going his way.
Meanwhile, Theodore finds Isabella in this cave. And then this knight approaches.
Yes.
And Theodore engages in an epic battle to save Isabella from this knight.
Which is crazy because it's a knight, right? So, armor, weapons, training. Theodore is
experience.
A peasant. No armor, no weapons.
Spoiler alert, the knight is Isabella's father, Frederick, come back from crusade. But somehow Theodore does manage to wound him quite badly.
Yes. So mistaken identity. I feel like that's another Gothic trope. This one doesn't last very long.
No, we figure it out right away. And then everyone goes back to the castle. We're all kind of regrouping here. The whole cast is back together. Isabella and Matilda have their little fight.
Over the peasant
Theodore,
boy.
Who's actually a count.
Who's actually a count, that's right.
He's nobility now, it's okay. But then Ippolita comes in with some news. Because while they were fighting over Theodore's heart, Manfred and Frederick have made an arrangement.
Oh my god. This is the point in the story where I wanted to throw the book, but I didn't have a physical book.
Frederick has given Manfred his blessing to marry his daughter Isabella.
In exchange,
Manfred has given Frederick his blessing to marry his daughter Matilda.
Yeah, very weird arrangement.
Hippolyta has to come in and explain this to Matilda, but she doesn't know the part initially where Manfred was going to divorce her.
Yeah.
She only knew that they had arranged for Frederick and Matilda to marry. Isabella is the one who tells her that Manfred intends to divorce her so that he can marry Isabella.
Yeah, because Manfred's excuse was, oh, well, we're related distantly. You got to annul the marriage so that I can marry this other person.
He makes up a loophole in their marriage. Right?
Yes. And Hippolyta is like, well, if that's what my husband wants, I guess I'll do it.
Yeah, she doesn't really, she's upset about it at first, but in the end, she's just the obedient wife.
I feel like she's almost a caricature of the obedient wife. Like, she's obedient to the point of self-destruction. They kind of call her virtuous, and I think she's painted as being a very virtuous person, but she has no morals, right? Like, she doesn't stand up for anything. She doesn't really fight for anything. But yeah, so Hippolyta is just gonna let this happen, even though she doesn't want it. She's a very devoted wife, but she's like, well, that's what my husband wants, so I guess I'll do it.
So at this point, it's looking like Manfred's plan is going to come to fruition after all. Then I think we have one of the most striking scenes of the entire book. Frederick he's in the monastery, and he goes in, and he sees a figure, and he thinks this figure is praying. Then it stands up, and it turns to him. Mm-hmm. And it's a skeleton. It's not a real person. It's just a skeleton.
In case you forgot about the spooky stuff with all this interpersonal drama.
Yeah, we've had a real soap opera going on here.
No, really, like, it kind of starts off as a spooky ghost story, and then we get the soap opera, and then the ghost story comes back. And then we get more soap opera.
And now we've got skeletons appearing to knights, telling them not to marry 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
So he decides, you know what, this is a very bad idea.
You know what, skeleton? You're right. You're right. When you're right, you're right. I mean, honestly, if a skeleton came up to me and told me something, I would probably listen to it too.
Yeah, that's not, something you see every day.
No, I think that would leave an impression on me.
But that's not even, the worst thing that happens.
No, of course not. It wouldn't be a Gothic story
Unless
if there
someone
wasn't...
died.
Yeah, unless someone who was alive died, not just, ghosts
Not
and
someone
skeletons.
who was already dead comes back.
Yeah. Someone's gotta die.
Yeah, so as Manfred's plans are all now spiraling out of control, he has learned that Theodore and a woman have gone off together. He thinks that Theodore and Isabella are an item after all.
Mm-hmm.
And Isabella has ruined everything.
Yep. It's her fault. Of course it's her fault.
He's going to get his vengeance. So he sneaks up on them in the monastery, reaches over, stabs her right in the chest.
Before we have the big reveal here. So this man makes this entire problem. Yes, the helmet crushed his son. Every other problem he created himself.
His reaction was not normal.
No.
He didn't even get it a full day to, let himself process these emotions and grieve.
That's true. He literally just went straight to, well, my son's dead. I guess I'll marry her now and make another son. That's it. So he makes all these problems, this entire scenario. He created this, essentially. And then he's like, you know whose fault it is? Isabella, that harlot. It's always the woman's fault. Always the woman's fault. All she's been doing is trying to get away from him and live her damn life, but it's her fault. So he's like, I'm gonna stab her. But...
big reveal, it wasn't Isabella.
He did not stab Isabella.
It was his own daughter, Matilda.
So, again, his own fault.
Yeah.
Literally, he stabbed his own daughter for what?
And then we have the longest, most drawn-out death scene. So while she's dying, they still have enough time to cart her from the monastery back to the castle, to put her up in her bedroom, to have a full conversation.
Yeah.
Before she actually expires.
But yeah, it is a very drawn-out death scene.
But it's drawn out enough for Matilda, being the very good, pious, virtuous daughter, to forgive everybody and make her peace with it being the end.
And obviously this death makes Manfred see that maybe he might have been acting rashly and shouldn't have done that.
Maybe, but his problems aren't over yet.
No, they're not.
We still have an ancient prophecy to contend with.
Oh, I almost forgot about the prophecy.
The prophecy. It's not done yet, because we've had the helmet, now we need the whole rest of the suit of armor.
Yes.
And it shows up. The statue of Alfonso the Good rolls up, and this is where we get a lot of exposition at the end that explains everything.
Yeah.
So Isabella is actually a descendant from Alfonso the Good, who's which makes her the rightful heir.
Yes.
To Otranto. Manfred is the Prince of Otranto because while Alfonso and his associate Ricardo were sailing to crusade, Ricardo tried to poison Alfonso. Or he succeeded at poisoning Alfonso. He murdered him.
Yeah.
And created a false will that named him as the successor. So Manfred's claim to Otranto was illegitimate.
Given what we know about Manfred, that tracks.
So now, the original rightful owner has grown too big for the castle, because this statue is too big, it destroys the castle.
Yep.
And the rightful heir has returned,
which
is Isabella. And however, Theodore is also related. I was really confused about... because they talked about Theodore's immediate family and how Jerome stopped being a count and about how they had lived in Sicily. Theodore's not a legitimate child.
No, he's not. He's definitely not.
He had this affair, and while he was gone, Theodore's mother and Theodore were kidnapped by pirates. And when...
Because why not? Why not?
This really does have everything.
Yeah, it really does.
And then when Jerome returned and they were gone, he gave up everything and became a monk.
We do get a wedding.
We do.
Between Isabella and Theodore. Which is okay because he's a count now.
Yes, but also the only reason that the only thing that they have in common is being really sad.
Yes, they basically get married to each other because, well, I mean, Isabella is in love with Theodore, but he was in love with Matilda. But they're both grieving Matilda. Theodore was in love with her, and Isabella and Matilda were kind of like sisters.
They were very close.
So they get married because Theodore is like, well, Matilda's dead, but you understand how I feel, so I guess we can get married.
And that's how it ends.
That's how it ends.
And Manfred and Hippolyta...
they, like, join a monastery.
Yeah.
Which I think Manfred should have died, personally.
Now,
that's something that Russian literature gets right. In Russian literature, the person has their come-to-Jesus moment, and they realize, oh, I was wrong, I did a bunch of bad stuff, I blah, 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 meaning of life, whatever, and then they die. But in this story, Manfred kills somebody, he kills his own daughter, and that's how he has his come-to-Jesus moment, and then he just gets to go live happily ever
dedicate
after.
His life to Jesus.
Yeah. Which, just in Russian literature, I think it's more satisfying.
Because we've talked about how at the end of Gothic, usually everyone gets what they deserve.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a happy ending, it's a just ending.
Yes.
Do you think that Manfred got what he deserved?
No, I think he got let off easy. That's the thing, right? The women in this story bore the brunt of everything. And the men just kind of, except for Conrad, the men just get to do whatever they want.
But Conrad was sickly, weak, not super manly child. The younger child.
No. He was not very masculine. He was not a suitable heir. So no, I don't feel like this is a just ending at all. It's kind of annoying. I feel okay saying this because they're fictional characters, but I think Manfred should have died.
Do you think then that Theodore and Isabella got the ending that they deserved? Because we left the story on their note.
That's true.
Which was a very down note.
It was a down note. They're like, we're sad, let's get married. Because we're both sad and we can be sad together. I was less salty about that. Because I think on a human level it makes more sense. Matilda was dead. So you don't really get the true love wins narrative that you, happy ending. Like you said, it's definitely not a happy ending. No. But I guess in terms of, if you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at it from the point of view of, karmic balance or whatever, for them, I think that's the right ending.
That's kind of what makes it the difference between a Gothic story and a fairy tale.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Because in the fairy tale, it would have been happily ever after.
It would have. That's true.
The villains probably still would have died.
Mm-hmm.
Because villains in fairy tales often just die.
Yeah.
And after many trials and tribulations,
the hero triumphs, gets the girl of his dreams, has a bunch of babies, the end.
In this one, the villain had... nothing about this was realistic.
No.
Right? But it was kind of he lost everything. He
did.
Lost his wealth. He lost his castle, his estate, his position of power.
Mm-hmm. That's true. He did.
He lost his family. There's a big theme in this, too, I think, of familial ruin.
Yes, and Horace lays it out near the beginning because the ghosts come out of the portraits, the family portraits are what's kind of coming to life and haunting Manfred.
Maybe it could reflect something about how Horace felt being the last member of his family.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, because everyone before him died. And then he just inherited all this stuff that he never expected to have.
Yeah. But we had, with even Friar Jerome, and how he thought he had lost his family because they were kidnapped by pirates.
That's true. Jerome got his family back.
Frederick was thought to be dead, and Isabella had this marriage arranged by people who weren't actually her relatives or were looking out for her best interests at all. So every family unit we see in this story has fallen apart in some way. Some of them get back together later on, and some just continue to crumble.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like, especially in terms of the history of the castle, where, there was this history of the fake will and the murder and the false claims, I think that all gets balanced in the end. I mean, I still just think Manfred should have died. That's just my opinion. Okay. That would have made me feel better. Yes, did he lose everything? Yeah, but also, I feel like he's the kind of man who give him 5 years and he'll
be back.
He'll be back. He'll get over it. And he'll be like, now wait a minute, I've been wronged, and he'll do it again. That's my interpretation of his character.
Well, there's no sequel, so...
No, there isn't. Well, and I think a big thing in Gothic novels is change, metamorphosis. So his change is that he realizes the error of his ways, and then he goes and he gives himself to God. So yeah. I see, for the time period, that being the happy ending of giving himself to God and repenting.
In a more religious society, yeah, that would have been taken as a just, not necessarily punishment, but this is the only way you can atone for everything you've done up till now.
Yeah, it's I see why it happened. I just... So that was the Castle of Otranto, or our discussion of the Castle of Otranto. Our banter. The first Gothic novel. Highly enjoyable. Definitely recommend, because you can listen to it. It's not very long. You can put it on, 1.5 speed on YouTube. Just, do your laundry and blast through it. Very entertaining. It is entertaining in a very Shakespearean way. So yes, that was episode 1 of the podcast. Expect more of this, I guess.
Yeah, so hopefully you will join us on our, adventure through the genre. Alright, I guess we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, okay, this is an ending.
Yeah, okay, well, join us next time.
Goodbye!